I wanted to do this piece now because, I mean, it takes about a year and a half, sometimes 2 years to vision a play and go through the commissioning. And it was around 2015, and it was the height of that wave of refugees that came across into Greece through Turkey, and a lot of it was in the news. And I think, like most artistic people, you want to sort of have a response to it. You want to be able to sort of be able to speak about it, or to have a conversation, because and have an artistic response to it, because it's a way that we can help. And I think there's been a lot of productions and theatre work that has come out of that impulse. Like most people, like everybody, I was horrified by the humanitarian disaster that was happening on our doorstep. So I wanted to do something, and I'd had the idea of Oliver Twist and sort of transposing it into sort of contemporary narrative for a very, very long time, not necessarily in the framework of the Syrian refugee crisis, but more in terms of the child trafficking that was quite prevalent in the news in the 1990s and onwards. So it seemed to be that there was a synergy of the time and the place and the idea that came together. So that's when it kind of first started. Then taking the plunge and doing it, and it felt that that this was a conversation that possibly needed to happen in schools. I talked to several refugee or artistic organisations that deal with refugees and refugee arts, and about what was happening in schools in terms of the conversation that was happening amongst young people. And the thing is, there cannot be enough work to start that conversation, because that's a conversation that young people are going to have. And I suppose why I really wanted to do this was because I don't think this is a crisis in the short term. I think this is something that's going to live with us for a very long time. And it's a situation that I think a younger generation is going to have to sort of manage and accommodate and integrate into their lives. So I think the sooner that we have that conversation, the more we can ask young people to see how they're going to integrate, adapt, accommodate. The refugee crisis is endemic. If it's not going to be Syria, it's going to be somewhere else. There is a population on the move. It's the biggest population movement since World War II. And I think that's why it's an important conversation to have now. I chose Oliver Twist because I felt that there was lots of resonances within that Victorian narrative in terms of the plot, that equated with how a child, an unaccompanied child, moves it through the world alone and can fall into sort of dangerous company. And I think there's been a lot of news reports in recent months about unaccompanied children, both in Calais and in the other French camps, and disappearing and moving and being trafficked by criminal gangs into the UK. So I felt that Oliver Twist was a vehicle. It's a much-loved story, something that we're very, very familiar with in this country, but I also felt it was a great vehicle to start that conversation. There's a lot of work that's been happening, a lot of work with refugees about their lives that other companies are doing really, really well. So I wanted to do something a bit different, maybe, to use a classic story that is well loved and within our canon of literature as a starting point, would maybe bring that story of refugees closer to our audience, so that they could see the familiar story through a different prism, through the prism of refugees, and then maybe start to humanize that story. But also how using a classic story, we don't take one real person's journey. We could also almost like bring lots of different elements of what we know about different people's journeys to tell the story of Abdo or Oliver. So that's why I chose Oliver Twist, because it's a much loved story and it felt like it had a great equation with the journey of an unaccompanied child. The challenges of updating it, obviously Oliver Twist is set within the early to mid 19th century. So it's very much a Victorian novel, and it's a social commentary on Victorian society. So and it's very long as well. So it really was a question of going, well, it's a reimagining rather than a pure adaptation. I think one of the big challenges was to take the Victorian novel and then to sort of pull from that the moments of the plot that are going to make the equation on the transposition credible to a modern audience. And so what we did in order to do that, I mean, obviously there was a lot of research and also just sort of cherry picking through all the different reports and the documentaries and people's stories. And going, well, that happened, so we can use that, and that's like that, and that's like that, and then sort of building the picture of that story. And it is a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, really, in that respect. So that was one of the really big challenges. And also, as I say, one of the challenges to make it credible. But it was really interesting when I look at it now, because I go, well, that's quite dramatic, isn't it? But all of these plot points you can draw from the news, from facts, from people's stories, and that they are based on things that have happened, that are happening. And what we've done is pulled them all together and sort of sewed them into this sort of reimagining of Oliver Twist.